Hey guys, it's Paradise, and this video is for people that want strong builds and bleed focused gear. As bleed is one of the most efficient statuses that you can use in Elden Ring, with the majority of bosses taking huge damage from it, here are some must-have bleed items, weapons and more that we've fallen in love with while playing the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, and you can let us know which ones you've personally been loving. Sometimes we can overlook consumable items, but this is definitely something that people should be using more in their build, as it just straight up increases your damage and arcane, making it a must-have item. The Sacred Bloody Flesh is an item that's dropped by the Bloodfiends and gives a similar effect to the White Mask. It gives you a buff that lasts for around 30 seconds, granting you a 5% damage increase. But if you're able to proc bleed within that window, you get another buff that increases your damage by around 15 to 18% for 30 seconds, making it one of the most powerful consumable items. While we haven't been able to fully test this in depth, it can supposedly stack with other buffs like Golden Vow, and you can make it last for quite a while by continuously proccing bleed. If you want to farm this for your build, then you want to look for the Bloodfiends, which you can find at Prospect Town or in the Rivermouth Cave, where there's an absolute ton of them. Just put on your farming gear and you should be able to grab a bunch of them. And then we have the Impenetrable Thorns. This is actually a sorcery, but it sends out 3 lines of Erdtree thorns in front of the caster. It even requires 24 faith to use, but interestingly, this is actually one of the strongest sources of bleed buildup in the game at the moment, until it likely gets a nerf. This, paired with the Maternal Staff, a reward for completing Ymir's questline, causes the spell not only to deal good damage on its own, but also instantly build and proc bleed with just a single cast if all 3 of the thorns connect to a target, which is easily done from close to medium range. So far, people have been enjoying this spell to cheese bosses, as it only requires a few casts to defeat most things due to the instant bleed effect. If you want to grab this, you can start at the Dark Chamber entrance just outside of the Mesmer boss fight room. Turn around and go down these stairs to the bottom, and then out on the bridge. Just take a right and go down the stairs, killing the shadow enemies on the way. You'll then see a shadow enemy looking over the edge. Kill him and look down below, where you'll see a second platform. You want to slowly walk off the edge until you fall on the lower platform. Watch out for the bat below and make sure to kill it, and just against the wall you'll see a body with a glowing item, which is this sorcery. And then we have the Claws of Night. Claws are not only one of the coolest and most fun weapons to use in the game, but they also attack rapidly, making them great status builders, and many of them have bleed passively on. The Claws of Night, though, take them to a whole new level. These claws shred enemies, have passive bleed, but also a unique skill that sets them apart and makes them completely viable to make your whole build around due to the insane bleed buildup of them. The Scattershot throw skill turns these claws into a short-range shotgun-style weapon. It conjures multiple copies of the claws in both your hands, and then lets you throw them all at once in front of you, firing off a ton of projectiles that have massive bleed buildup, and you can follow it up with an additional input to throw them again. This is spammable, quick, and just one repeated input builds bleed on a target, as well as dealing good damage, making it an extremely strong skill, and the melee weapon is also solid at the same time. To get this, you need to progress around halfway through Ymir and Yolon's questline. We have a full walkthrough guide on the channel if you want it, but essentially make your way here to the cathedral on the map and talk to Ymir. He's going to then tell you to ring some bells one at a time. The first is located here, and the second is located here. Then you need to talk to Ymir, refresh the area with a fast travel, and go under his throne into this creepy looking area, where you will get invaded by the Sword Hand of Night Anna. Defeating her will grant you the Claws of Night. And next we have a weapon that doesn't even scale with arcane, but the passive bleed on it is enough for it to be a top tier bleed weapon due to its amazing unique skill that builds bleed up and triggers it extremely quickly. The Falx is an awesome weapon that can be power stanced to dual wield and primarily scales with dex. However, its 55 bleed passive makes up for this. The unique skill Revenge's Blade can be charged for a dashing double strike attack, but a follow-up strong attack will execute this insane rapid hack and slash attack that does multiple hits in a quick window. These rapid slashes quickly build up bleed and proc it pretty much every time you use it. This makes the Falx a top tier dex weapon, but also an amazing bleed weapon without having to actually invest in the arcane stat. You can get this by defeating Hornsent in one of his scripted invasions. Depending on who you talked to and summoned to help you in boss fights, he may be outside the Church of Bud and invade you at the top of the steps, or he may be with Leader and the rest of the group near the end of the DLC when you fight them. And next up, there's 3 weapons that were added in the DLC and were made exactly for bleed builds, so if you haven't tried them out, you are missing out because they do huge damage. This first one may be lesser known but is extremely strong. It's the Bloodfiend's Fork. This is a rare and amazing scaling bleed spear, which has great stats when set to either bleed or arcane infusions. You can get over 140 passive bleed buildup when spec'd into arcane on these weapons, but where it really slaps is when you power stance these bad boys as they stack all that bleed together, allowing you to quickly get back-to-back bleed procs. All you need to do is hit with them when power stanced a few times, and the bosses just get melted. You can even boost the passive bleed buildup on them further by putting the old classic seppuku setup on each of them, and then power stancing them for that extra damage, with talismans that give you bonus damage on successive hits to make an amazing build. If you want to grab them, you will need to farm the Bloodfiends holding the spear as it is a rare drop. The area we recommend farming is just outside the Lava Intake Ruins Forge, which is just south of the castle front site of Grace, very near the start of the DLC, meaning you could get this build going very early on. And next is a weapon that you may be familiar with, as it was overpowered, got nerfed, but then is still extremely strong even afterwards. The Bloodfiend's arm promotes the ultimate Unga Bunga bonking playstyle, as this weapon features a unique charged strong attack that creates a blood AoE effect, and you can infuse it with bleed to create a very deadly and easy to play synergy of spamming these charged strong attacks to build bleed up massively. Also, for a colossal weapon and a charged attack, this is executed very quickly, meaning you can easily do this in those short windows when fighting bosses. This thing used to build and trigger bleed in just 1 to 2 charged attacks. Now it does need 2 to 4, so the nerf did affect it, but it doesn't stop it from being an excellent bleed weapon, and the hit itself is still pretty chonky. So if you like the idea of bleed bonking enemies to death, this is for you. To get the Bloodfiend's blood arm, you need to head to the Prospect Town, which is near the start of the DLC at the Cliff Road terminus. Run just south until you get to the ruins, and parkour your way up to the top to the higher section. Run through and parkour even more to the very top of the town, and this has a group of enemies, where one of them seems to be a guaranteed drop to get this. And next, while this isn't a must-have weapon, we will mention it as it is the 3rd Bloodfiend's weapon. The Bloodfiend's Blood Spear is a 100% drop from the water just outside the Telus Ruin Forge, and this weapon, while being okay, basically functions at the moment like a mini Moog spear, so you probably are better picking it up anyway. A core difference between this weapon is that it allows you to cast the skill at a range, which is pretty cool. And then we have a very cool Ash of War that allows any large or colossal sword, which can be infused with an Ash of War, to become a literal flying drill that rapidly strikes enemies, causing quick and devastating damage, but also quickly building bleed due to the rapid hits. This is the Spinning Gravity Thrust Ash of War. Using the skill causes you to float in the air and then aim and rapidly spin towards your enemy, dealing rapid ticks of damage, which on their own deal good and high damage, but with a bleed infusion on the weapon, causes bleed to build and trigger super quickly. A follow-up input allows you to do it twice very quickly, and you have massively high hyper armor while doing this, so you can tank most hits without getting interrupted. I like using this on the Fire Knight's Greatsword for a massive 120 bleed buildup, and you can get this Ash of War from the Remembrance of the Wild Boar Rider by defeating Commander Gaius here on the map. Trade this at the Round Table hold for his lance weapon, then remove the Ash of War from the weapon and attune it to your favorite colossal sword with blood infusement. And next is a new armor set that, while it might be the last thing you unlock in the new Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, it perfectly synergizes with many bleed weapon skills and Ashes of War. This is the Ansbach set. Each piece grants a multiplicative 3% increase to Blood Oath and Dynastic skills, and the helmet adds 4%. However, the white mask is usually better to use as a helmet, so generally you would want to use this set with the white mask to massively increase your power with blood skills and Ashes of War. To get this, you need to complete the whole of Sir Ansbach's questline all the way through to the end of the DLC. While there may be an alternative shorter way to do this, the way that we know of is by doing his full quest, beating the final boss at the end of the DLC, and then grabbing this set from his body afterwards. One of my favourite experiences in the DLC though was fighting Rakshasa, and luckily all of their items that they drop are amazing for builds, as the armour is a straight up increase to all of your damage, but the actual weapon dropped is Raksasa's Great Katana, which is also awesome and comes with bleed on it. The great thing about this Great Katana is that while using the skill Weed Cutter, you get a ton of hyper armour, meaning you can just stand there, tank damage, not get knocked over, and build up bleed on enemies like a real lawnmower. If you haven't visited Rakshasa, we highly recommend it for the armor set alone, which is core to many builds, but the Great Katana is also a ton of fun to play with. You can grab this at the Eastern Nameless Mausoleum, where you will need to fight him to get them. Now, while the Rakshasa's Great Katana is awesome, sometimes the more cookie-cutter version of a weapon type ends up being a must-have. This is because the scaling can often be better on them, allowing you to infuse whatever you want, and you can even apply buffs on the weapon to add extra damage and other sources of damage. So we wanted to quickly highlight some of these weapons that are amazing for builds. Obviously, first up is the Great Katana. It has a great moveset and benefits from Bloodfiend Blade as a buff, and when you use your preferred infusion, the damage skyrockets. Even the basic Ash of War on this thing does amazing damage, making it a real force to be reckoned with, and the majority of the time, this is a better pick than even named weapons in the Great Katana category. You can get this here on the map just next to the Ghost Flame Dragon. And next up is a weapon that has been a menace to both bosses and PvP players. You can tell the developer that made the Backhand Blade was really putting in the work, as the Ash of War with it is straight busted, and the scaling for this weapon is amazing too. Again, this works amazingly when you apply the bleed infusion on it, or your preferred infusion with whatever stats you're leaning towards. This lets you delete enemies in no time, and generally is a ton of fun to play with. To be honest, Dual Blade users from Monster Hunter will probably love this. You can get it super early as well, just visit this coffin located here on the map in the starting area of the DLC in the Gravesite Plains. And next up is a weapon that's one of our new favourite types. We actually recently made a whole build on this weapon that puts Bleed, Fire and Frostbite all together and just destroys everything. That being said, even just speccing this thing straight into Blood Infusion or Heavy and Keen makes this an insane bleed option. This has a fast-hitting moveset, great Ashes of War to put on it, and it seems that many people are leaning into having Endure on this, as it allows you to just keep up the offense and spam attacks. This is another weapon that you can pick up early on. All you need to do is head here on the map and fight Logor, who will drop this item after he's been defeated. So drop a like and comment to let us know if you enjoyed all of these crazy bleed items, and if there's anything more you would add to the list so we can all learn together as a community. Make sure you're subscribed though, because we have so much more Elden Ring already on the channel for you.